Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Geeked Out. My name is Kyle,
And I'm Juan.
and for this week, we decided that we're going to do a little bit of a different thing. We're actually going to do a little bit of a retrospective on a few of the X Men movies. We're going to start this week with the first one, and we're going to do this leading in for the next few weeks, leading into the new X Men '97 series that Disney is going to be premiering on March 20th. And I personally am going to say I'm stoked for that. I'm super excited to watch that show.
Really?
So, oh, I can't wait, dude. I love the animated series, and I'm really excited to see it.
I am. I just wish that they did get a lot of the original voice actors,
They did.
which, yeah, a lot of them are Canadian because the
Oh,
voice act.
I thought you said I wish they had gotten them.
No, they did. They got a lot of them. It's just the voice actor that plays Wolverine. He's gotten
I
older.
I noticed that in the trailer.
I just wish if if AI could help. I mean, I know it's a lot of taboo topic right now, but I think it could have lended itself pairing with at least give us that original that because he's older, which is fine, but still you should have at least punched it up to where it sounds like the animated series from back in the day because it's supposed to be a continuation.
Yeah, it's supposed to pick up right where it left off, and I agree because like you say with the AI stuff, I mean they've done things with other actors. Like I know I believe I read something where James Earl Jones has like signed over the rights that they can use his voice as Darth Vader in the future for Star Wars. So clearly that's going to be all digital
Yeah,
stuff. So why couldn't they all alter his voice a little bit for the same effect?
they already used it in Obi-Wan, all Darth Vader's voice
Was that all digital
acting.
recreated?
Yeah, it was all
Well,
AI.
well, it sounded. I mean, you couldn't even tell.
It kind of works because you know Darth Vader's voice is kind of robotic, so it worked flawlessly. But it hasn't really worked. I mean, they haven't used it yet on like a human character.
Yeah,
That um yeah, no, it they did it then, and it just seemed to work. I don't see how it because it's constantly improving.
that
I
would be
don't
pretty
see why
cool.
they used it to make the voice more like the animated series. You know what I mean?
I will say my one worry is I was looking at the cast list on IMDb, and it showed a different actor voicing Gambit, but then it also showed the original actor. So I don't know what that is going to entail. And I did notice that he is noticeably absent in terms of his voice in the trailer, and I think that's one that if they're not able to get that original actor to do the same thing, like I think that could be a problem because just for people who watch that show, the voice of Gambit is so iconic from that show, and it's I think that it would be damn near impossible to recreate it.
But the thing is, there's so many talented voice actors that are really good at mimicking voices. You could get people to just mimic the voice, like
Yeah, I guess that's true.
you know what I mean.
Because
So at least
I always felt that Rogue and Gambits were the two, and it was because those two had the really thick accents. I thought those two were always easily the most iconic voices of that show.
oh yeah, for sure, yeah,
And again, like I say, those two were very noticeably absent from the trailer in terms of hearing them speak.
true. But that's just a trailer. I mean, there's a million goddamn X-Men, so maybe they just didn't
Oh yeah,
focus
absolutely.
So I'll judge when I hear them in the show. But I'm assuming, if Disney actually cares, that they would try their best to, if they couldn't get the original, get some actors that could at least mimic as close as they could.
Yeah, I think so too. And the whole thing is, if they don't, I think they also know that they, because this is going to be the first time that the X-Men have been in anything produced by Disney, and I know that in the future they're going to want to do movies and things like that. So if they don't nail this, it could really negatively impact fans' views of what they could do with a live action X-Men movie.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a huge X-Men fan, so I would probably see it anyways. I mean, I've been there's a lot of some of the newer movies I haven't seen because of the disappointment, but I think I'd be willing to give it a shot with uh, with Disney at the helm because they've done pretty good so far.
Yeah. I mean, Marvel has been a little stale lately, and the perfect way to rejuvenize that franchise, adding the X-Men. But you have to
Yeah,
do it right. You have
well,
to do
yeah,
it right.
you
You
add
can't
you
start.
had the teams because that was their big thing. With there was their teams were the moneymaker with
Yeah,
the Avengers, so they're going to use the X-Men. They're going to use Fantastic Four. I think that's how
exactly.
they're going to really revitalize this whole thing because it has been pretty stale pretty much since Endgame, in my opinion.
I agree. I agree. There's so much story from the comics that you can draw from the X-Men alone,
Oh yeah,
and yeah, I think that's going to be the new direction. It's going to carry, definitely can carry Marvel for another 10 years. If you just focus on X-Men stuff, they're not, but that's how deep X-Men's roots are into Marvel as a whole.
yeah, they're everywhere. I mean, like we had said when we did our first Spider-Man episode, the for the longest time it's been Spider-Man and X-Men have been Marvel's bread and butter, and only in recent years when because I mean in the 90s when they were almost bankrupt and they had to sell off those characters that's uh, when they kind of started focusing on the others. But had they never had those financial problems, I'd be willing to bet that we would have more X-Men and Spider-Man stuff than we would Avengers. I don't think the Avengers would even exist if that wouldn't have happened. And they would have just kept on with their popular things, the X-Men and Spider-Man.
Yeah, I mean, we don't really know the direction, but we definitely know they would have focused if they had still all the rights. They would have focused on their bigger characters.
Yeah.
But yeah,
My whole thing is so many people now are they're worrying and the big speculation is, oh, who are they going to cast to play Wolverine, and no one's ever going to do it as good as Hugh Jackman, and yada yada yada. And
yeah,
I used to be, well, I'm still skeptical somewhat, but I used to be quite skeptical of things like that until I saw, and I know I brought it up before, but until I saw Heath Ledger in The Dark Knight, and then I was like, well, anybody could be anything. But when I really think about it, even Hugh Jackman, when he was cast as Wolverine, it was a huge gamble because not a lot of people realize this, but Hugh Jackman was a song and dance man from Australia. He was not an action star or anything close to what he is as Wolverine. He was a almost like a Broadway guy. Like he
yeah.
was.
He just beat out the you ever watch Scrubs?
Yep.
the doctor.
John C. McGinley?
What character did he play?
Dr. Cox.
Yeah, yeah. He was. I think he was going to be casted, but then they, at the last minute, went with Hugh Jackman.
Well, in doing some research for this, I actually have I found a list on. I mean, take this with a grain of salt because it's IMDb trivia, but I I found a list of actors that were considered, and the funniest thing is, so I'll read this now. It's Bryan Singer's first choice to play Wolverine was Russell Crowe. I don't see that at all. I mean, 2000. That was when that was when he did Gladiator. So he looked considerably different than he does now, but I still don't see it. And some of the other, I don't believe these are. I can't believe that all of these are true because it says some of the others, the actors that were considered were Mel Gibson, Aaron Eckhart, John Claude Van Damme, Viggo Mortensen, Edward Norton, and then we get into these.
It was
What?
probably one of those things where they gave him a list, and he probably had to choose 10, 20 people, and
Well,
all those guys on like the first wave.
well, the funny thing is, before Hugh Jackman actually was cast for Wolverine, another actor by the name of Dougray Scott was cast. And if you know who that is, if you've ever seen Mission Impossible 2, he plays the villain in that movie.
Okay.
He was cast, but there were scheduling conflicts with Mission Impossible 2, and also he was injured in a motorcycle or a motorbike accident, it says. So that's why Hugh Jackman got the role. So for anybody who loves Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, you have Tom Cruise and everybody on the set of Mission Impossible 2 to thank, it sounds like.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that too. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, we'll get. We still haven't even fully introduced the movie, but obviously this week we're going to be talking about the first X-Men movie, originally released July 14th in 2000, and it was directed by Bryan Singer. And normally at this point, I'll usually read off some of the notable actors and actresses in the film, but this is such a loaded cast that I think that we're just going to kind of go through them kind of in discussion as opposed to just me reading them off. Now, for people who don't know, the X-Men originally were created in 1963 by Jack Kirby and Stan Lee. Of course, they're Marvel characters. Who else would they have been created by? And they have been one of the most popular staples of Marvel Comics. Specifically, I think people in our generation would, as much as people might have read the comics, I think people would remember them more from the animated series from the 90s. This movie has a 7.3 out of 10 rating on IMDb, along with an 82% critic score and an 83% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, making it certified fresh. It had a roughly estimated budget of $75 million, and it made at the box office just over $296 million. Now, that doesn't sound like nearly as much as what some of these comic book movies are making today, but I mean, apart from, because we got to remember, this was really our big foray into like the mainstream comic book movie, because this was before Spider-Man. Obviously, this was before the MCU. Before
And
this, this is what revitalized it after that fucking Schumacher Batman nonsense.
Oh yeah, and this movie has a actual connection to the MCU in the form of Kevin Feige. I believe this was one of the first movies he worked on.
Was he a producer?
I want to say he was.
I must not have seen that. That's really interesting, actually.
Yeah, because he was the one that kept Wolverine's hairstyle.
You're right. I just looked it up. He was an associate producer, Kevin Feige. Wow, I hadn't known that. And if I had, I completely forgot.
Yeah, it's just one of those random things I know. Yeah, yeah, yeah. He's part of the reason why Wolverine has his look. He kept it. He kind of fought for it.
Well, he needs that. I mean, it's an iconic thing.
Oh yeah, I'm sure he voiced a lot more, um, you know, things on this movie that were comic accurate. But I know that one was one he definitely fought for.
Well, I'm glad he did because, I mean, if anybody has read an X-Men comic or seen even a screen grab or a screenshot of the animated series of Wolverine without his costume, his mask on, that's the hair. That's the look that he has. It's just something that it would be like making it would be like giving Xavier hair. Like it just wouldn't make sense without it.
Yeah, or Superman without that curl.
Yeah, exactly. But where did you first see this movie? I'm gonna guess that you saw it in theaters as well.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I was the same way.
I don't remember the trailer.
You say
Oh,
you do remember the trailer?
hell yeah. I do remember the trailer for sure. And I was so hyped. I was um huge fan of the animated series, which ended not too long after this or before this movie. It's a few years. So I was still riding the high off that, so watching the reruns. And I had quite a few comic books, but no like complete runs or anything, just a bunch of random ones.
Yeah.
And I had of random X-Men comics. So from that and I knowing the characters that were in there, I was really hyped.
Yeah, I was the same way. I've been a huge fan of the X-Men ever since I was a little kid. They were, along with my Daredevil comics, which I've talked about on this podcast before. They were among the first ones that I got, and I collected them throughout the years. But the same thing, I never really had, like you said, a run of them. They were just again random issues that kind of sounded interesting to me, or because growing up we didn't really have. I didn't really go to a quote unquote comic book store. I don't even know if or where there would have been one when I was a kid. I know there are several now around that are local to where we live that I do frequent on a semi-regular basis, or I did up to a couple of years ago and before COVID hit. But yeah, I read them all the time, and same as you, when that animated series was out in the '90s, I was watching every episode. I mean, I still to this day I own all of it on DVD, and I've watched it several times. So I was definitely hyped for this movie. I went and saw it in theaters, and I was not disappointed. I love this movie. Even now, it's still one of my favorite comic book movies.
Yeah,
I will say that I might it's the same as I was with the Spider-Man movies. I might like the second one better. I don't know. It kind of flips and flops with me, but I love this movie, and even now 24 years later it still holds up, I think, anyways.
yeah. For what it was a really good movie. It's a really good introduction for people who don't read comic books or didn't watch the animated show into the X-Men. But knowing the X-Men, knowing the comics, and knowing the characters, you couldn't help but nitpick it to death. Not complain, but just nitpicks.
I still nitpick it.
So, I mean, as good as it is, um, if they would have leaned into more comic accurate, it definitely would have been more well received for fans. Even though
Well,
it's still iconic and well received to fans, it would have been a little bit more sweeter.
the funny thing is, and I'm pretty sure you and I have talked about this off mic before, um, but the whole thing was, and we're gonna skip all around this movie, but at the end when they're in the Blackbird and they're all suited up in their uniforms, whatever, and they make that comment where Wolverine is saying like, "You guys really go out in public in these," and Cyclops has his little "Would you prefer yellow spandex?" That, I mean, that was an Easter egg for fans, but at the same time, I think the reason that they did that, and like I said, we've talked about this. I think the reason they did that back then is because this was the most recent superhero movie, I believe, before this was Batman and Robin, and that was so campy and so over the top that I think they wanted to try and make this somewhat realistic, where they were just in like the black outfits, where as opposed to their outlandish comic book attire. Which I think if it was made like when these new ones come out, I would kind of be surprised if they're not in what they were wearing in the comics in the animated series, because now once you've got these MCU movies where you've got the Captain America suit and the Thor suit and Iron Man and all that, it makes more sense to put them in what they were wearing in the comics, and I don't think they'll be as afraid now as they were back then. I think I think they looked at it as no one's going to take this seriously because they're going to be wearing ridiculous multicolored outfits and one guy's in this and one guy's in that, and I think they were just worried about it, and that's why they put them in those black outfits that a lot of people take issue with.
Yeah, that and it was in the 2000s, so people are really into black, all black get-ups at the time, like the Matrix and things like that. So yeah, it was yeah, it was that as well. Um, yeah.
I want to ask, what did you think of the opening of this movie? Because it, I mean, even now when rewatching it, the opening of this movie it kind of throws you for a loop, because it's like, oh yeah, we're gonna watch this comic book movie about mutants and things like that, and it starts off in 1944 Poland during the midst of the Holocaust. Like,
Hmm.
I mean, even now watching it is like, oh, not that I forgot about it, but it's almost like my brain for a split second did forget for a second, and when that came on screen, I went, oh my god, that's right, that's how it's Magneto and his parents, and they're being separated and pulled apart, and obviously
Yeah.
his parents are being taken to a gas chamber or something like that, and that's when his powers manifest, and you see what he does to the metal gate and things like that, and it's a very powerful opening to this movie.
Yeah, it's iconic. And I think it's needed. I think if they do a reboot, it needs to open almost similar because you need to at least the point of that scene, the opening, was to show you the worst of humanity through the eyes of Magneto. So you understand, at least, even though you don't agree with his methods, you understand why he's doing what he's doing, or why he feels about humans, because he's seen the worst of it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And then basically you go right from that into Jean Grey at the Senate hearing, and she's being questioned by Senator Kelly, and he wants them to impose a mutant registration, which if you're in the mind of Magneto, it's almost like to him it would be history repeating itself, because that's what they had the Jews do, is the whole registering thing. And so I think they purposely did that to show that correlation, that Magneto's basically like, here we go again, and I'm not going to stand for this, and this is kind of what puts his plan in motion, that he knows, and that's what he says, like, there's a war coming, and he wants to be on the winning side, obviously, because he's seen what it looks like from the opposite end.
Yeah. And that's always been, Magneto's character. He is all about his kind and his people, and he's the type to ensure protection of his people through any means.
Yeah, I thought it's something when I first saw this movie. So when this movie came out, I was 13. I was 13 that summer, and that type of stuff and that imagery just kind of, I'm sure, was just completely lost on me at that age. But especially now watching it, it's hard not to think of those types of things and those correlations between.
They've always the Stan Lee based the X-Men and the prejudice against them on the African American race. Evidence is pointing because Magneto and Professor X are modeled after Malcolm X and Dr. Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
Two leaders that had completely different approaches. Black people to have civil rights.
Absolutely, and over the years, a lot of groups have looked at it as a way. I mean, I know that I've heard a lot of talk about the gay community and the LGBT community viewing X-Men as an allegory to their lifestyle and being persecuted and things like that. And it's absolutely right. I mean, that's why, and everybody's like, well, why is everybody like the X-Men? Why is this and that? Because the X-Men you can see as a representation of who you really are. Like, everybody out there seems to have that front that they put up that, I want everybody to like me, I want this and I want that, but deep down, only a handful, most people, only a handful know who you really are as a person. And I think that when you watch something like the X-Men and they're being persecuted like that, it allows most people to almost like, if they're able to I can't even think of the word to articulate it, but if they're able to show their true selves and what they really can do, maybe I can too.
Yeah, I mean, they just want to be accepted and treated like everybody else. And you have people that hate them for no reason, and that can be extremely frustrating for a lot of people. And they act in various ways because of the mistreatment, right? Some people, they are more fearful and run away, and some people fight.
Yeah. Well, obviously Magneto wants that war, and he almost is like a mutant supremacist, I guess is the best way to say it, because he thinks that they are better. He even says it in the great line when he's walking away from Charles. He says, "We are the future, Charles, not them."
Mm-hmm.
And
that's what he's. Yeah.
I will say, during this scene with the Senate hearing, I did like the little Easter egg that Senator Kelly refers to a girl who can walk through walls, and obviously that's Kitty Pryde, or eventually Shadowcat, who you do see later in the movie. She's not named, but if you know what to look for, you see her in the classroom.
Yeah, she's one of those X-Men that there's several that are part of like the main roster in either the comics or the animated series, that throughout the trilogy of these movies, they're kind of there, kind of, if you pay attention, but don't really get any shine, which is a shame.
Yeah, I agree as well. And it was funny because when this first was announced, I can imagine there were a lot of people out there saying, "Oh, it's going to be because it's they're going to be the original X-Men," but this is not the cast that we get in this movie is not the original X-Men that were part of the team. Some of them are. Well,
Uh, 2 of them are original.
were Cyclops, Marvel Girl, Beast, Angel, and Iceman.
Marvel is Jean Grey. Yeah, they only ever referred to her as Marvel Girl in like the early X-Men,
Yeah.
and then they just did it and called her fucking Jean Grey.
Well, Iceman is in this movie, but not in a significant
Yeah,
role.
but yeah, exactly. I forgot that he was even in this movie because,
Shit, even Pyro's in this movie.
and it's a shame because Iceman, up until I don't know, it's always constantly changing, but he was my favorite superhero for a long time. Definitely during this time when I watched it in the 2000s.
Really?
And oh yeah, I just like that power. I just like ice power for some reason.
I like when
And,
he did the full body, like the full ice body.
and I was a beast with him at Marvel versus Capcom 2. And
I never played that game.
oh man, yeah, he's in. I think he's in that one and another one, Marvel Superheroes or X-Men Children of Adam. There's a couple fighting games, but yeah, when he's in it, he's a monster, and I loved playing with him. So I think that was part of the reason why he was my favorite.
Well, I was going to ask this question in a little bit, but I'll ask it now. Who is your favorite X-Men character? And you just said that back then when this came out, it probably would have been Iceman. Is it the same now or is it different?
My
Because I know most people, their favorite is Wolverine. And I think a lot of that is just because of the movies, and he's kind of the central figure of all of these X-Men movies.
he's okay. He's great. You can't hate on it, but it's like a basic
The thing
and
I love about Wolverine is that he's Canadian.
right. No, he's great. Um, I would still say Iceman, but Storm has been growing on me for sure.
Which version? Because this version sucks.
Any other version,
Any version that's not Halle Berry.
any other version, bro, for sure. Yeah, no, the live action versions have done her dirty.
Yeah,
And yeah, the person that should have gotten it, that was fan casted for years prior to this movie, that should have gotten it, who was definitely of age at the time and would have crushed it, and is in the MCU, is Angela Bassett.
she would have been fantastic as Storm.
She would have absolutely crushed it and would have probably changed the course of her fandom as a character in the movie. She probably would have been one of the fan favorites. And she would
Yeah,
have nailed the accent down.
yeah. Halle Berry doesn't even attempt an accent.
She attempts it, but it's so lazy and half-assed that you don't even hear it. But it's there.
Now, I will say, I've only of the new ones, I've only watched First Class and Days of Future Past. I haven't seen Apocalypse and I haven't seen Dark Phoenix. So I'm not 100% sure about the Storm in those movies.
Her accent is only in the first one, and it's immediately dropped
So that's
because
it. So that's it. So she comes in Apocalypse.
she was in this. She was in the first one, the second one, third one. Uh, yeah, Days of Future Past, Apocalypse. No. I'm talking
No,
about the. Okay, all right.
yeah, she wasn't in First Class or
I saw my. Yeah, I think those ones she didn't have an accent at all.
well, she wasn't in First Class or Days of Future Past, but then
No,
I know that in Apocalypse it's a younger girl who plays her.
she was in Days of Future Past. She
Yeah, but that was Halle Berry.
yeah,
No, I mean
So,
the young girl that they recast, whose name is escaping me at the moment.
I have no idea.
But yeah, I haven't seen those movies. I will eventually watch them. I can't bring myself to it at the moment. I've heard they're so bad.
I could probably bet a pretty penny she didn't even have an accent at all in those movies, because why would they? Even though she's from Africa, born there, raised there. But again, I like X-Men movies. I love the trilogy. I mean, the first and second one, third one is questionable. Um,
Oh, it's something, all right.
and the other sequels that came after. But especially with this movie, as much as I loved it, enjoyed it, most of the things you're gonna hear me say that are negatives is just mostly nitpicks.
Yeah, I don't have any big gripes with this movie. Again, and a lot of the nitpicks are because I am such a fan, and it's like, oh, they might have not done this right, or changed this aspect, or stuff like that. But overall, I think this is a really good movie. I will say that my favorite X-Men, I've always been a huge fan of Gambit, and
It was tight.
it really sucks that he's not in any of these movies. I mean, you get him in that X-Men Origins Wolverine. Uh,
Yeah,
uh,
character that they just part of the main roster, at least the iconic roster, and they again, I think that another character that they did dirty. 'Cause
yeah, and I like Taylor Kitsch who plays him, but it wasn't like
no, no, I didn't. I just you.
oh, he doesn't do a good job. I'm just saying I like the actor.
Yeah, yeah, I know. But when I think of him, I think of Gambit. Unfortunately, well, that and John Carter, which is surprisingly a good movie. You should watch it.
No,
Uh,
I think Tim Riggins from Friday Night Lights. That's the first thing that comes to mind. But if you
oh,
haven't watched that show, then obviously that's hard to think of him as that character.
for sure.
But my favorite X-Men has always been Beast.
Beast.
And I will say that is my favorite part of that stupid third movie. Is I
He
like the way that they did Beast with Kelsey Grammer.
he is one of my favorite. He would probably be third in, like, when we're talking about the animated series. I
I
love
love him in that show.
I loved him in that
I
because
love he's constantly like hanging upside down reading books and just
right
that intellectual.
and would just hit you with some knowledge real quick, and you're a kid, you don't know what the fuck he's talking about.
No, and I don't know what it is with me, but both in this, like Beast is my favorite, being like he's the nerdy intellectual guy, and I'm the same way with Ninja Turtles. Donatello has always been my favorite. I don't know why I gravitate towards that intellectual nerdy type character, but I've just always been a huge fan of both of those two.
Yeah,
So
Don, yeah, he does machines, right? So,
absolutely, they're both inventive and creators.
and they both have muscles, so it's best of both worlds.
Exactly. So what about the rest of this cast? Now, are there any?
Everyone except for, like, maybe when it comes to the X-Men, the actual X-Men, fucking two,
Everyone what is good or bad?
miscast. I wouldn't say bad, just miscast.
Who do you think is miscast? Because I'm very interested to hear who you're gonna say with this.
Storm, obviously.
Well, that's one. But I've never been the biggest fan of Halle Berry in general. But that's just my own personal opinions towards her
It's great.
acting abilities.
In a lot of the roles that she played in certain movies, but in this one, it was just complete miscast. She's not a bad
I
actor.
agree.
Don't hate her. Just she wasn't right for the role. As well as James Marsden as Cyclops. Just wasn't feeling him. He was,
I don't mind him as Cyclops. I don't think he was fantastic, but I also don't think he was terrible.
No,
Like
what?
he was serviceable, I think.
Yeah, just the direction that they took Cyclops was not. Oh. So that probably lends itself to why I just didn't like his performance. And Jean Grey, I just, you know, I, I, I don't know. I think because I will always see her as the bad guy in GoldenEye.
Xenia Onatopp. I was just gonna say that.
It's hard to because she's like when you think of Jean Grey, you think of the all-American girl, and she doesn't have that look.
Which is really funny because in the new ones they cast fucking Sophie Turner, who's from the UK, to play her.
Yeah, which another miscast. Good lord. Even though I don't hate her as an actress, it just wasn't right. It just wasn't right. But I haven't seen that movie, so
That's what I was just gonna say. I haven't seen any of those movies with her, so I don't know. I do know that when they came out with it, I went that feels like a miscast, but I don't know because, like I say, I haven't seen them either.
yeah, yeah. I'll reserve my judgment when I actually see the movie if I ever see it.
I will eventually. I just don't know when. I just when I'm gonna be able to sit down and digest those movies.
Hmm.
So,
Rogue.
oh god, don't even get me fucking started on Rogue.
Freaking Iceman, like it's just because again, like it's nitpicking. I just you know what these characters are, and like when another interpretation gets it wrong, it kind of rubs you the wrong way. So it might not even be the actors itself more than the direction that they, you know, the writing took the characters. But yeah, Rogue is definitely that's probably the bigger miscast, acting wise and look wise, personality wise, just not right.
Now, the only way that I think they would be able to defend that is because a good portion of this movie is her origin story. A lot of her origin story. So what we see as Rogue, or we view as Rogue, a lot of from the animated series, as we've kind of said, that's that's more in the future for her. So like obviously she hasn't had her interaction with Captain Marvel where that gives her the ability to fly and the super strength and all that other stuff. But even still, like again, when I think Rogue, it all comes back to that animated series. It's that accent. It's that bright red hair with the white the white streak. It just they missed the mark. I felt.
Yeah, Rogue is supposed to be like a Southern belle, you know, and I got none of that from.
Well, and the other thing is she's supposed to be. I'm not saying Anna Paquin is an unattractive woman or anything like that, but Rogue is also supposed to be like this just jaw dropping, drop dead gorgeous woman who the whole thing is men are instantly almost like a siren where men are attracted to her, but they can't touch her because of her. You know, she could kill them. And I don't feel that Anna Paquin, like I said, Anna Paquin's an attractive woman, but I don't feel that she evokes that. And they certainly weren't. They certainly weren't trying to emphasize that with her the way that they have her portrayed in this film. She just seems like an awkward teenager, which I guess is kind of what they were going for because that's what she's supposed to be. But and I think a lot of it is like I said, we view Rogue more as much more of an adult character because in the animated series and in the comics, she's already established. She's already an adult. She's had her powers. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But yeah, that was a big miscast. I agree with that as well. To me, that's probably that and the Halle Berry one of probably the two most glaring.
Yeah.
I will say I know he didn't have much to do in this movie, but we've both seen the other films. I liked I think it's Shawn Ashmore, or is it Aaron? It's one of the twins. I can't. I'll have to look it up real quick as I'm kind of talking, but one of the twins. I did like him as Bobby Drake, as Iceman, and again, that's a lot of that is going back to what he does in future movies as well as like plus this one, because he doesn't really have much to do in this movie, but I do like him giving the little I don't even know what it is, but the little block of ice with the X in it, and he says "Welcome to Mutant High," but I think he was a pretty decent cast for Iceman. It is Shawn Ashmore, so I think this is Shawn. I think Aaron was in Smallville, or Aaron is in The Boys, or whichever one it is.
Fuck, they're the same dude.
Yeah, they're identical twins, so it's.
Motherfucker. But no, it was okay. I'm just, I'm extra hating because it was my favorite.
He's your favorite, yeah.
So I just wish he had a little bit, more to do in this story.
Yeah.
And I've always known him as being kind of like the troublemaker, the almost,
class clown.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The class clown that,
that giant pain in the ass to all the adults.
Yeah. has a lot of potential behind him, but he rather goof off. And you really didn't get any of that. He was overly serious. I mean, you got that introduction with him, doing a little bit of the flirting with the ice powers, which was good. I just wish, they would have continued with that momentum, and instead of just making him, more serious during the later interactions he had.
Yeah, I agree with that. Now we'll go back. What do you think of? I mean, we already talked a little bit about Wolverine, but Hugh Jackman as this character.
He did great. Like,
he's a touch too tall. But again, nitpicking.
Everything else worked for me except for that one little small detail.
Yeah.
No pun intended. About the character, yeah. Like one of the reasons why he's called Wolverine is because he's short, much like a Wolverine.
I've always kind of joked that if you put like 30 or 40 pounds of muscle on Tom Cruise, he'd be perfect for Wolverine.
He'd be even perfect. Danny DeVito.
Oh God, he'd have to lose some weight.
He'd have to do so much steroids. But no, I don't think Wolverine is that short, to be honest. I think he's like 5'2".
Yeah, so Tom Cruise.
Sure. No, he wouldn't have. I don't, as crazy as Tom Cruise is, especially around then. I don't think he would have had that believability of the animalistic.
No, I don't think so either.
That
intensity.
Intensity, exactly.
I will say though, I really liked his intro in the bar fight, or the cage fighting in the bar. I liked when the guys just fucking beating the shit out of him, and then it's when he throws a punch, and then Wolverine punches his fist, and you hear that clanging just of the metal.
Like, he knows he is a fucking unkillable machine, and he's fighting a fucking regular dude. I mean, I get
It's just a little bit of cheating.
that's cheating ass motherfucker. But no, yeah, I did enjoy that though, very much so.
Yeah, I like that. I like that intro. Um, Another like I will say so. Then also in this movie I'll save the big ones for a minute. I liked the casting of Mystique. To me, has never really mattered. I mean, it matters in the later films because you get Jennifer Lawrence doing a lot of that movie out of the makeup and just as Raven in like her regular human form. But I mean, Rebecca Romijn in this movie, she doesn't do enough in terms of acting. I found to warrant a good or bad performance. I will say I loved the look of Mystique, and I loved the way that it looks when she transforms with like the almost like scales folding over themselves or
Yeah,
unfolding.
I think the character Mystique left an impact in the movie just because she, that's a dope power to have,
Oh, it's
and
awesome.
they utilized it in the movie pretty good and a decent amount. Even though you didn't give her a whole lot of acting because she's usually, shape shifting into another character and that
Yeah.
character doing the acting. But I know I think she was one of the more memorable and interesting characters to see on screen.
Yeah, I was a really big fan of that character and the way that she was portrayed. And I'm really glad that they didn't use and I really hope that if she's in these new movies they stick with that type of look as opposed to using her comic accurate costume because
Oh, that dress, that white dress.
yeah, the white dress with like the gem on her forehead.
No, they're gonna do it. What are you talking
I
about?
hope I really hope not.
Well, that gem's coming. At least the dress. You probably won't get the gem, but you're getting that dress at least for sure. For sure, man.
I think they'll probably do it just because it'll be easier. I mean, they probably will do 90% of it in CGI anyways, but like the fact that Rebecca Romijn for this movie, that was another thing I looked up when I found or when I was doing some of the research on this, is that she would have to sit for like 9 hours every day to get that makeup applied, and it was for most of the filming, she was secluded, like because they wanted everybody's reactions when they would see her in that makeup and prosthetics. They would want it to be genuine on camera, so she didn't get to interact with a lot of the crew and the cast because of that, because they wanted the authenticity, and that just sounds like a really miserable way to make a movie. I mean, I've never made a movie, obviously, so I don't know a good or a bad way, but to basically have to sit by yourself for hours at a time while everybody else is kind of mingling with one another between takes just seems like a really miserable way to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a role. Every role's different. That was just the one that pertained. But yeah, I'm sure it wasn't the best time for her. But, you got a iconic character out of it. I'm not hating.
No, not at all. I kind of feel bad for that stuff that she went through with it.
True.
What did you think of Sabretooth? I'm really curious to hear what you're going to say about this one.
It's okay. I liked him. I liked the look. He didn't get much time, like screen time. He didn't get a whole lot of interactions with him. I thought it was
No, no, they kind of make um, because basically Magneto just has the three followers in his brotherhood. They kind of make his his followers like just like a typical lackey. Like they don't really say a whole lot. It's just like he gives them orders and they go and do it, which is kind of unfortunate because I mean, I personally think it would be kind of interesting to hear those characters, like to hear from them what they're thinking, what their ideas might be, or stuff like that. But
Yeah, I mean, you could still have them be lackeys, but at least give them more personality to, you know, shine. So we,
I liked Sabretooth. I really liked the look of him, and I was glad that for them they kind of went a little bit closer to what the comics and animated series looked like. He was really the only one. Everybody else, well, I guess Mystique and Toad. But it's funny because any of the X-Men are just generic, and then you've got the villains that are actually kind of looking somewhat like they do in the comics, which I think is kind of an interesting choice.
yeah, they're, yeah, they were more comic accurate than the heroes, which is fine.
I
I mean,
I will say I loved the look of Toad,
oh yeah,
and
because
I mean it also helps the fact that it's Ray Park who played him, and I'm just a big fan of his in general, considering he was the best part of the entire prequel trilogy of Star Wars.
oh, he was
Oh,
a
I
highlight.
said it.
He's a highlight. There's several highlights of that trilogy. It was definitely,
Duel of the Fates. I rest my case.
of course.
And I did like that.
I think he was actually George Lucas's one of his biggest regrets was I think he's
Killing
put
him.
on record saying that. Yeah.
Then he comes back in the end, the Clone Wars TV show
Oh, yeah. You
with
don't think? Yeah. Of
mechanical legs,
course they
or
believe
Rebels. I forget which one it was.
they're gonna retcon the shit out of that, and they did.
Oh yeah, I will say that it was hard not to have a bit of a Darth Maul feeling, or maybe they did it as a callback on purpose. And I know that Ray Park is a big martial artist, but the scene when they're in the Empire, not the Empire State Building, I'm sorry, the Statue of Liberty, and he throws, I forget who it is, down the elevator shaft, and there's like a rod that's holding the door open, and he grabs it and does like the little flip with his hand. Like, it just reminded me of when he had the double-edged lightsaber, and I thought that was that was the first thing I thought of, was, oh, it's like Darth Maul spinning a fucking lightsaber. Meanwhile, it's just because it's the actor who portrayed both these parts.
Yeah.
But he is victim to what I like to call, and I've heard many other people call it, one of the, if not the worst line in film history. Would you like to do the honors?
Fuck, man. I went back and rewatched it, and it's not.
Don't you dare defend this line.
I can't say it's the worst. I
Top
can't say
10?
the worst. I just can't. Now that I've seen a lot of superhero movies since 2000, I can't put it as one of the top. It's just random and unnecessary and just stupid. It's just stupid.
It's that, and it's also the the way Halle Berry delivers the line.
You thought she was really saying some shit.
There's no impact to it, though. It's
You
just
thought she
like,
was saying the most epic shit. Nah, is what was it? Do you know what happens to a toe when it gets struck by lightning?
the same thing that happens to everything else.
Of course, bitch. Why would you
I
say that?
I would have loved for Toe to just be like,
You thought she was just dropped a banger of a fucking one-liner in the likes of Arnold Schwarzenegger. Nah, Holly. Whoever wrote that for you did you dirty.
I would love to see outtakes of that line. There's got to be, like, I would love to just see if if anybody is laughing at her, like in the background. Because I'm pretty sure if I would have been on the set of this movie, I would have been like, what the fuck? Like,
Yeah.
of course, that's like saying what? That's like being like, what? what happens to a house that gets picked up by a tornado? What do you think happens?
Same thing that happens to everything else.
It gets destroyed. It gets electrocuted. It's like
Okay, what's your point? Point, bitch. And he didn't even hear you. You got the toe got struck by lightning long after you said that, before you said that line.
oh
So who the
god,
fuck are you saying that line to? Were you talking to yourself, Storm?
it was so stupid.
It just was stupid because it was random.
Yeah.
But yeah, no.
I will say that, and I think you're going to agree with me considering the way you said it earlier. I think there are two cast members of this movie that were absolutely spot on perfect. And
That is so obvious that he was fan casted years ago in a Wizards magazine.
Patrick Stewart,
Like,
yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I did like when they're doing like his intro when Wolverine's kind of running around the mansion and he comes in and they're introducing him. Oh, this is Cyclops and Storm and Jean Grey and all this other stuff, and he's realizing like you guys don't use real names, and he looks at Patrick Stewart and he says, "What do they call you, Wheels?" Apparently Hugh Jackman ad-libbed that line because apparently the original line in the script was, "What do they call you, Baldy?" And I just think Wheels is just so much better. It's such a. I'm really glad they let him kind of ad-lib that and went with it. But yeah, Patrick Stewart is he's fantastic. He looks exactly like the animation. It's like the animators drew it to look like him.
Yeah. No,
Like
yeah.
and I didn't mind James McAvoy in the, like I said, I've only seen the two First Class and Days of Future Past. I didn't mind him, but he doesn't come close to
No.
Patrick Stewart.
No. Yeah, no. Yeah, this is one of those iconic roles that you can't really see anybody else playing. And the attempts were poorly received. Pretty lackluster performance in general. But yeah, no, he is right up there with iconic movie role choices, right up there with, Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man and J. Jonah Jameson as what the hell is his name?
J.K. Simmons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's right up there. And I'm glad that he got the role because he crushed it. So much so that he's still playing the fucking character over 20 years later.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what they're gonna do if they have somebody playing him when they make this new live action X-Men. I don't know what they're gonna do, what direction they're gonna go with, but I'm gonna say whoever gets cast in that role, if there is somebody in that role, I would say you've got some big shoes or wheels to fill.
You got a big chair to fill for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I would say, just in my opinion, just as perfectly cast is Sir Ian McKellen as Magneto. I mean, he's so good, and it's funny because rewatching this, he is. I forget how old he was when they filmed this movie, but he looks older, and then like nowadays he just almost ancient type thing, like in comparison you would think, but he looks exactly like what he was in the animated show, and I thought he did such a stellar standout job. And I'm gonna say I need to make a very big thank you to Bryan Singer for this, because in my research I read something about Ian McKellen. And
I wouldn't go directing or thanking the
oh, this has nothing to do with X-Men.
for anything.
Oh, I have to, because apparently I read this again in the trivia that after accepting the role of Magneto, Ian McKellen was offered the role of Gandalf in Lord of the Rings, which he originally had to decline. However, after speaking with Singer about his interest in playing Gandalf, Singer agreed to rearrange the movie's schedule so that he would finish all of his scenes by the end of the year and allow him to be in New Zealand in January of 2000 to film Lord of the Rings.
Oh
So
no,
I will
that part.
thank I will thank Bryan Singer for that all day long, because I mean, Lord of the Rings to me is one of the greatest trilogies of anything ever put on film. I'm a huge, huge fan of it, and I love him as Gandalf. And I'm terrified to think of what would have happened with those movies if Singer wouldn't have agreed to that, and we would have had somebody else cast as Gandalf.
Oh, I'm just saying that the name of that director is it's kind of taboo now because a lot of the allegations that are a lot of the allegations that he was found guilty of.
Oh, he's a terrible person, but he
Yeah.
allowed.
Have to establish that first. Establish that first before you
He's
praise
a he's a
praising.
horrible yeah, he's a horrible human being, but he allowed Sir Ian McKellen to play Gandalf. God damn it!
There you go. Yeah, a lot. He's done a lot of harm out there to where he completely destroyed his career. So yeah, no, yeah, he definitely had did what he did, which led to that Gandalf happening.
And
No, that I understand that, which is great. Like great. He crushed both roles, man.
yeah,
And uh yeah, he's part of those two characters alone is why most of our generation completely loved
yeah.
this man.
And it's not so much in this movie, but in the second and the third one as well. The shots of him when he's flying or floating, whatever you want to call it, with his cape kind of blowing in the wind, with that helmet on, it just looks like it could have been ripped right off the page of one of the comics, and it looks so good. I can't stress enough how good that shot those shots look of him, and it's hard to imagine anybody else. Again, like you say with Patrick Stewart, it's hard to imagine anybody else playing that role other than Ian McKellen.
Yeah.
And the chemistry that him and Patrick Stewart have on screen, they really do seem like they're old friends and yet adversaries at the same time. It's an interesting dynamic that I don't think a lot of people experience in their everyday life. But those two guys tapped into something, and it made it really believable that they really were like the best of friends, and at the same time had such opposing ideological views that it couldn't last, and they couldn't kind of be on the same side.
Yeah. No, yeah, their friendship and falling out and like enemies but having mutual respect for another is definitely very important to the dynamic between those two characters. And it was totally believable with these
Yeah.
actors. Yeah, man. Yeah, definitely enjoyed almost every interaction that they had in the trilogy, especially this movie.
Yeah. Now, I will, going back to some of the negative things, we've already had a few of these little nitpicky things to do. I mean, throughout the movie, the basic thing that Magneto wants to accomplish in this movie is he has a machine that he wants to expose regular humans to a certain type or level of radiation that will allow them to mutate and become mutants themselves. And the scenes with um, with Senator Kelly. Bruce Davidson, I believe, is the actor's name. Dude, some of that turns into straight body horror. And
It's just ew. It's ew.
yeah, like I don't I don't know if they had to go this route with the I mean, I honestly think they could have just done the whole registration thing like they did and just have him as an antagonist without maybe doing some of this. I don't know. I could be wrong. This might have been inevitable, but I just it's so weird to watch, especially like the scenes where he's coming out of the water and then when he disintegrates into water when he dies. It just there's such weird scenes, and like I say, they're body horror.
Yeah, it's fucking gross.
And they seem out of place for this type of movie.
Just random, and there's no, soft intro into this fucking crazy thing that just happened. Yeah, like the whole trying to make everybody into mutants. That plot was. I don't understand why it was definitely wasn't needed. I don't think it speaks true to the character of Magneto.
No, no, he wouldn't want them to. He basically just want them to die. Like he doesn't want to turn people into mutants. He just wants mutants to reign supreme over non-mutants.
And respect for his people. Yeah, he would never do that. But yeah, why it's so off-putting in this movie doing that. And and when they turn Senator Kelly into this fucking jellyfish water creature, it still even to this day when I see it, it's just gives me the heebie-jeebies because it's just so nasty and gross. I tried to I'm not gonna lie, I skip forward through those scenes because I don't like that. I just don't like seeing it. It's weird.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. What irritates me about it too is that you go from when Magneto does this experiment procedure, whatever you want to call it, on him. It goes from that, and the next time you see him, he's just in a prison cell, and he's like squishing his face through the bars. There's no context of what's going on.
Yeah, I think that was the point. Like the point, I guess, was we're not supposed to know what happened. We're supposed to find out when he does that whatever happened to him turned him into a mutant. So yeah, we're as shocked and surprised as Senator Kelly in that moment. But it wasn't necessary to have.
No, I agree. That's one of my biggest gripes with this movie is that whole thing. But it is what it is. It's odd because I believe I read something where this is the only X-Men movie that they've made that has an original script, whereas everything else is like adapted, is a storyline adapted from the comics, which, I mean, these comics have been around for 40, 50 years or 40 years at that point. You're telling me they couldn't have come up with something better than that? I mean, I know they got to it in Days of Future Past, but I'm pretty sure I could go ask 100 people who grew up watching the animated series, and I'd be willing to bet that 90% or more of them would say, if you want to start an X-Men movie or film series, whatever you want to call it, based around one storyline from the TV show or the comics or something like that, what would it be? And I'd be willing to bet that about 90% would say the Sentinels, because that's how the show started, and it was a great introduction to what the X-Men and what these mutants are going through with that persecution. And I know that this is kind of building towards that, but just go to that. Just be okay, we couldn't get them to register, now we're going to do it forcibly and bring in Trask and bring in the Sentinels and things like that. I think that would have been a better way to go, as opposed to waiting for the fifth movie in total to get to that point.
Yeah, and even if if you didn't have the budget to introduce Sentinels, you could at least tease them and make that a looming threat for future movies. You didn't have to have or go in the direction that they did. You could have just leaned in on the whole, the registration, the prejudice amongst mutants and humans. You could have done a whole movie just focusing on that.
Yeah, because I even remember in the animated series with the prejudice against mutants. I mean, in the show there are protests with people holding signs talking about they want segregated schools for their kids from mutants and non-mutants. You could play up all of that stuff. They could have shown that it's the public that wants it, not just this branch of the government.
Exactly. No,
because that's what you don't really see. You don't really see a whole lot of what non-mutants, except for really Senator Kelly, feel about the whole situation.
Exactly. Yeah, it would have been nice if they would have leaned into that. It would have made for a better movie.
Oh, but I will say this movie, it does give you Rogue's hair. You get to see how she got that white stripe.
Oh yeah. Nice. That was the whole reason that, so she could have her to explain the white stripe.
But I will say I love in the second movie, even if they only did it for that reason, I love in the second movie when Magneto is kind of working with them, and him and Mystique are sitting in the Blackbird, and it's Rogue and Bobby, and they're like, what are you guys doing? And Magneto, in such a catty, kind of melodramatic way, he just says to her, "We love what you've done with your hair." I love that line. So for that alone, I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll take you guys giving her the white stripe, because I know that in the next movie I get to hear Ian McKellen say that line.
Yeah. No, it's one of those things.
Yeah, Rogue was a big miss, and it sucks because I love that character, and it just they as you've said many times, they did her dirty.
So, yeah, big time.
I mean, I will say though, I liked the camaraderie is the wrong word, but the almost like father-daughter, uncle-niece type relationship that her and Wolverine have throughout this movie. Especially I like that little that touching moment on the train before she gets kidnapped by Magneto, where Wolverine's basically saying I don't really like those people at that mansion either, but if you and I go back there together, we can kind of lean on one another, and it shows a much softer side to him, a more human side.
Yeah. Well, the thing about Wolverine in the comics and the animated show is that he's always paired with a teenage girl. For whatever reason, he's always mentoring a teenage girl. It's Rogue, and
Jubilee.
Shadow, Jubilee, yeah, and I'm
I don't know why they do that either.
That they did that, they showed that in the movie, And yeah, the scenes with them, bonding, and the scenes that were emotional towards the end. Yeah, they definitely it worked for me, even though again I didn't really agree on the actress. Um, but for those scenes, I think they it was well done.
Yeah, and I also will say it has not, again, nothing to do with the character. I liked the way they showed it, the visual representation of her powers when she would touch somebody, and you'd see those like the very pronounced veins come out like on their face and things like that. Because apart from showing her like when Wolverine wakes up and stabs her and she takes his healing ability, apart from them showing the claw marks close or the stab wounds close, you would have no idea. So I like that they added that little bit of visual representation to be like, okay, she's touching them and this is what it looks like when she's taking that life force or that power from them.
Hmm. That was a good choice. You could see what's happening. No, yeah, no, it was a good choice. So I think in like the animated show, it was like a fucking they just distorted the color of the screen. I don't think it was a
Yeah, it
maybe.
wasn't anything like it is in the movie.
Yeah, but no, yeah, I liked how they did that.
um, another thing I really enjoyed about this is, even though neither one of us are the biggest fans of James Marsden as Cyclops, I didn't hate him. I just didn't think he was great. I did like the basic instant hate back and forth between him and Wolverine. It felt very, very much like the show. That back and forth quippiness between the two of them. The one thing I didn't like was when Wolverine basically flips him off with the fucking claw. I thought that was kind of stupid.
Really?
Yeah, I wasn't crazy on that. I did like later when you see Mystique disguised as Wolverine and he comes back and sees the main group and they're like, "How do we know you're really you?" And he just goes, "You're a dick." And Scott goes, "Okay." But no, I've always taken a bit of an issue with that like that flipping off with the claw. I don't know why. It just seems really. It seems almost too comic booky.
I thought it was okay. I didn't. I thought it was okay. I didn't think it was like too cheesy or comic booky myself. I think it worked for the moment, for sure.
I mean, it worked. It's something that's always kind of rubbed me the wrong way.
Mm.
But that's that's just kind of my own opinion. Um, Another thing that I really loved about this movie is I love the school. I love the way that it looks. I love the building they use, which has been used in um, other forms of media. It now think it's the funny thing is in this movie it's portrayed as an entire school. So then you look at the other things that this has been used in, and it's been used as just a mansion. So it was the mansion in Billy Madison, it was the Luther Mansion in Smallville, and the Queen Mansion in the CW show Arrow. So those families are all rich enough to live in this fucking house that this this uh this movie series portrays as an entire school. Now I know it's Charles' family owns the house, but fuck, how much money do those people, the families in those TV shows and movies have that they can just own this house?
I ain't balling. Balling.
But it's exactly what when I would read the comics or anything like that, it's exactly what you would I would envision anyways personally of what this school would look like both inside and out. And I love that the Blackbird, as Brian Cox puts it in the second movie, comes up out of the basketball court.
Yeah, no, that it's a saying that that they definitely got, that they definitely needed in there, and yeah, when you see it, it's great.
And I love the ivy growing up on it has such it really does have an academic feel to it.
Yeah, it definitely feels like a school.
Yeah. But I think so. I mean, at least for me, I think that pretty much covers all of my notes and the points that I wanted to talk. Oh, one other thing that I didn't mention. Now, I don't know what your opinion on this is, but what did you think of the way the claws looked? Because I've heard kind of varying things from different people, where some people thought they looked good, some people didn't. I personally thought they looked great.
I think they looked great. It's a new location for his claws, because originally he didn't have, the claws weren't attached to him. There were more gloves,
Yeah,
but in the comics, in the show, they're on his top of his hand.
yeah, they come out like because this one they come out between his knuckles, which I feel makes more sense. But in the comics, they're kind of a couple inches back from his knuckles and just kind of protrude out. That's why if you ever look at his gloves, he's got like the three raised extraction points. I don't even know what you would call them, where they come out from.
Hmm. I thought they were good. They didn't. Rewatched some of the movie a couple days ago. That held up for me.
I thought they looked. I thought they actually really looked cool. The scene where you have the close up of his fist and you actually watch that middle one split the skin and come out slowly.
Yeah, that was good.
So I actually prefer the positioning where they move them to. I feel that it's a little bit more realistic and it would actually give him more rigidity and power behind them as opposed to them coming out on the top of his hand.
Mhm.
But that could just be the way my brain is working. I really don't know if that's true or not, but
Yeah, it's a nitpick that I wouldn't even, for me, it's not a nitpick. I didn't mind that choice. It did, yeah, it does make sense why they went with that approach. And but yeah, the effects for the claws themselves, it holds up, and it didn't, you know, I enjoyed it. It didn't bother me.
yeah. And hey, you know what? To all our listeners, if you don't like the adamantium claws, you can go watch X-Men Origins Wolverine and you get to see the fucking bone claws.
Yeah,
Actually, don't do that. Don't ever go watch that movie. Please, just save yourself time.
just yourself the comic of the same. I'm pretty sure it's the same name.
The comic of it, yeah.
Yeah, just pick that up instead. It's been way better story.
It's that's a little brutal, but that's neither here nor there. I hope I never have to rewatch that movie again.
Yeah, same.
But I think that's gonna pretty much, like I say, wrap it up. I think I got everything out that I wanted to. Is there anything you'd like to discuss or bring up before we sign off on this one?
No, I hit all my notes actually. Going
Okay.
through 'em.
Okay. So for closing thoughts, I'll say that overall I really like this movie. I think it still holds up really really well, and I thought that as I said, a lot of the characters looked like they were pulled from the comics, whereas several others didn't. But you know what? Not everything can be perfect. And again, I just like what I said with the Spider-Man movies. It seems like whichever one I watched last is the one I like the most. So for me right now, this would be my favorite. But I'm pretty sure if I watched X2 tomorrow, X2 would be my favorite. X2 I love because of Nightcrawler, and he was such a cool character that they added in, but that's neither here nor there. But for this movie, I'm going to give it a solid 7.5 out of 10, and I would highly recommend this to anyone and everyone, whether you've seen it or not. If you haven't seen it, watch it. You're going to love it. And if you have seen it, pop it back in and watch it again because it's just as good as it was when you saw it in theaters 24 years ago. That hurts to say.
No, I agree. I as a superhero movie in the 2000s, I think it was I still really enjoy this movie. Back then I really enjoyed it. Though my nitpicks, there were many. I still thought this is I still think this is an iconic movie. And if you are a fan of the MCU and are a bit younger, and you haven't watched this, I definitely implore you to give this a watch because it definitely still holds up, and it'll give you a different vibe from the MCU movies, even though it is a superhero movie in the same comic universe. It's vastly different vibe. I also am giving this a 7.5. And yeah, if you haven't seen this in a while, yeah, definitely recommend rewatching
it. So I think that's going to do it for this episode of Geeked Out. And as always, I would implore you to follow us on our socials. We are on X, Instagram, and we just put a new page up on Facebook. I will include the description or the sorry, not the description. I will put all those links in the description of the episode, and don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. You can find us pretty much wherever podcasts are available, except Apple Podcasts, which I've been having issues getting this posted to. I don't know why, but I'm going to keep trying. Um, Next week, we're going to continue this, and we're going to go into the next phase of X-Men movies. So we're gonna try and do one movie from each. I guess we're gonna call them phases. I don't know what else to refer to them as. But next week we're going to watch Days of Future Past, and this is a movie that I haven't watched in a couple of years, but I really loved this movie, and I'm really looking forward to revisiting it. I hope you feel the same way, Juan.
Sorry?
I said I'm really looking forward to rewatching this. I hope you feel the same way.
Oh, heck yeah. One of the highlights of the X-Men franchise cinematic.
Oh yeah, I love this movie. I'm super pumped to watch it.
It's been quite a few years since I've rewatched it, but there's a new superhero movie every other week.
Yeah, it certainly seems that way nowadays. But yeah, we'd invite you to come back next week and join us for that. And until then, thanks for listening, everybody. Take it easy.
Peace.